Okay, we're going to go ahead and start the October meeting of the Mono Basin Historical Society, and we'll have a quick meeting with some announcements, and then we'll get on to our presentation. Just so that everyone knows, the museum is closed for the season, and we still need to coordinate with the county when they're going to come and turn the water off. And Claude texted me back this afternoon and said probably in a couple of weeks, and he'll let me know. And so hopefully, Dave, there'll be enough time for you to be able to, I'm thinking if you can come and show Jarrett what you do to empty that, the water and stuff. Okay. And so we have changed the hours on Facebook and on our website, and it was another full season. We were really fortunate that we were able to have the museum open 7 days a week from Memorial Day to I think it was about mid-August, and then we went down to 5 days a week till the end of September. And Jarrett will give us a museum report here in a little bit, and we're hoping that we'll have Jarrett back next season for our museum coordinator. So right now all things look good. So the Ghost Tour was a great success. It was a lot of fun. We started the weekend off with dinner here at the Mono Inn, which was absolutely lovely, and we had a little bit of wind come through when we were getting going with the Rusty Can raffle, and it was amazing. The tickets came out of the Rusty Cans and swirled around. Maybe it was when Maud Conway came in from the cemetery. I don't know, but it was crazy. And so we ended up bringing everything inside, and all the tickets got stuck in one big hopper, and we went from there, and everyone was really forgiving about how things worked out. But it was quite the win that we had. We thought it was going to go away, but it did not. That's right. It stopped. When Hillary started talking to us, maybe you had the magic touch. And we do have videos online of the Ghost Tour. So we've got Maud Conway, and we've got Nora Archer was talking to Nikki Cassidy, and we've got Aunt Hattie and Aunt Clara, who were Harriet Hess's aunts, who talked about Augie going to school, and we've got Hillary talking. You're on YouTube. You are a star on YouTube. So Friday night was fun, and then we went on to Saturday morning, and we were at the schoolhouse, and we were visited by some ladies that came up from the cemetery. So first came up was Nora Archer came out to talk about the
Why does it look like Patty Peterson by the
Robin? Yeah. Somehow you're on mute.
Okay. Whoa, okay. Have I been on mute the whole time? Well, we're just going to continue on like I wasn't on mute. We were talking about the Ghost Tour. Rich, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, he can. Okay, so we were talking about the Ghost Tour, and on Saturday we were visited by quite a few ghosts, and then after Nora finished interviewing Nikki Cassidy, who was one of her students, who was really misbehaving, by the way, and had to be whacked a little bit with the ruler, and he finally started straightening himself out. But anyway, after that, the three ladies took back off to the cemetery, and we went up to the Lakeview Lodge. We had a lovely lunch, And then the Banta family talked to us about the different generations that have been there for 90 years with the Lakeview Lodge. And then from there, we went over to the church, and we had a taped interview with Joe Scanavino, which is also on our YouTube channel. That's pretty interesting about his remembrances of the schoolhouse that was at the Goat Ranch. And so many thanks to everyone. It was a fun weekend. They're always tiring. And Lenora is out of town, but she'll be able to give us a financial report next month and let us know how we did there. We received a few very generous donations this month that are much, much appreciated. We had an anonymous donation, and we had donations from Barry and Denise McPherson and from Bill Sylvester totaling $1,500. So it's really very much appreciated. We don't have the full, but I think it's just a reflection of the economy that the museum didn't have the donations or the sales that it seemed like we've had in previous years. So these donations are really very much appreciated and helpful. We have a lot of photographs, and we have our binders. The binders that we have in the museum of our families and of like the Tioga Lodge, the Mono Inn, the Log Cabin Mine, those are one copy. That's all we have of those. And so what I'm hoping that we can do is to get these things digitized and then have copies in different areas, so that if, heaven forbid, we were to have an accident, have a fire, that we don't lose all of this wonderful information. So what I don't know, I'm asking for your all's help, because we have tons and tons of photographs, and I don't know if we need a special scanner to make sure that we get all the photographs, or just any old scanner. But if there's anybody out there with any expertise in this, please reach out either to me or to the curator email and give us some ideas. We do have a trustee meeting coming up in November, and I'm going to ask the trustees for some guidance as far as how to strategize the best way of going about getting these very, very valuable assets so that nothing can happen to them in the future, and they're here for future generations. Let's see, the only other thing I've got is we're beginning to compile the yearly newsletter, and if anyone would like to submit an article, that would be much appreciated. Stories about life and times in the Basin are always great to have for the newsletter and to share with folks that we have. I think we've got close to 100 members, and so it's nice for them to be able to have those. Got it. And I'll remind us again at the end of the meeting, but we do have for next month, our presentation is Born Free and Equal, the story of loyal Japanese Americans. The book was written by Ansel Adams, and it will be presented by Jeff Gabriel, who is the executive director of ESEA, and Bernadette Solomon. I can't read your writing, Dave. Johnson. Okay, Bernadette Johnson. Okay, she used to be in charge of Manzanar, and these photographs in this book were taken in Manzanar by Ansel Adams. So I think that will be really nice. What I'd like to do is see if Jarrett would like to come on and give the museum report. Jarrett, are you there?
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, guys. This is my end of the year report for 2022. For this season, the museum has collected around $2,612 in donations, and the museum has had approximately 3,200 visitors. Accessions have all been completed for the year 2022. We have some new displays in the museum. The first is a Paiute berry basket used for collecting elderberries, chokecherries, and buckberries. Second is a painting by M. Randall, The Big Eye of Mono Basin, painted on the south side of the Goat Ranch Schoolhouse, donated by Joe Scandavino. From now to next year's goals. I would like to have as much of our 2022 accessions on display for visitors next year. I would also like to clean out the Native American exhibit and remodel the display, and complete William Jerry Andrews wall display, as well as continue to work with Bob Marks on a display for 10 Paiute landowners and their story in the Mono Basin. Lastly, it has been a wonderful experience working with Robin, Lenore, Linda, Alden, and Cole. I look forward to next year to be just as productive as this year has been. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jarrett. Jarrett has been really wonderful to work with. I think we're really fortunate to have him. Linda, do you have anything?
No, I think Jared covered it. Jared covered it pretty much. The only thing I want to say is that about all of our photographs, I did collect them, just about every photo, and they're all in the fireproof file cabinet. So, but they all need to be sorted again because they're just in categories and they need to have more work done on them. So that's a job for another season. Yeah. And we did receive 24 donations this year in objects. And so that was a lot of accessioning to be done, and Jared to get it all done. So and he mentioned some of the ones that we got. So that's all for me.
Okay, let's see, and thank you, Linda. Linda's been working all summer in the museum sorting and categorizing, and there were boxes and boxes of stuff back from Norm, weren't they? That, and there's still 4 boxes left. So there's still a lot there. So let's see. I think it's about time to start our presentation. And our presentation tonight is 100 Years of the Mono Inn, presented by Hillary Hansen Jones. And we're ready for you, Hillary.
So if you look up there, you can see that while this is black, the camera is looking at you.
And I can just turn that.
You speak close into that, and then you just use that to go forward. It should do it. If you need to go back, just use the left arrow.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I was going to give a couple people the Zoom link, but I wasn't aware of what it was. So is it going to be recorded and they can watch it later? A couple of people couldn't come. Okay, great. I'll worry about that later. So, Rich, are we recording? Dave would like to know.
Yes, we are.
So thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for asking me, Robin, to talk to you guys tonight. This is going to be a long version of what I tell to the guests in the restaurant every night. Robin mentioned that we were going to talk about the Mono Inn, but it doesn't make sense for me to tell you about the Mono Inn unless I tell you how my family got here to this area. So I'm going to start with a little history of how my family got here into the Mono Basin, our involvement in everything we were involved in, and how Tom and I came to buy the Mono Inn. So my great-grandfather, Pop Miller, so this is going to be sort of a guide through our families. So my great-aunt Vera put this great book together called Mono Lake Memories, and it's essentially guest books, letters, recordings, voice recordings, and about, I think, 2 semesters at Pasadena City College for my great aunt Vera, who has now passed away, putting this book together in the 90s of all of our family's recollections of the last 100 years that my family's been here at Mono Lake and in the Mono Basin. So essentially, I'm just going to guide you through that and then talk to you about how we got here. So it really starts with my great-grandfather, Carl Ludwig von Harhausen, and we'll talk about him a little bit more, but he essentially was the reason that we all ended up here. And he immigrated to America after the Spanish-American War, but so I'll go ahead. Yeah, pushing it. Oh, just waiting for you. Great. Perfect. So this is a map of the, probably most people here have seen this. This is a map with some names of some of the homesteading families that came to the basin. And you'll see the list with the numbers on the bottom. If you look sort of at the group of numbers on the right-hand side of the, you'll see the star, and then across from the star, you'll see kind of a grouping of numbers. And all of those numbers are the North Shore, where my family homesteaded. And the number that corresponds to the property that we have now is number 15. So you'll see that that was the Matley property. And so he was the original owner of our property. And he, well, you have this organized a little differently, but we'll go back to this one. Yeah, I know. I want to go back to those slides because it doesn't really make sense if I don't do it in this order. So this was the cabin, John Matley's cabin, that was built around 1850 on the property that we have down here in the North Shore, located between the park and the cemetery. This is the original cabin that they were using for some salt harvesting and whatever else they were doing, sheep grazing. They were raising, they were growing a lot of alfalfa. And so the original property was owned by John Matley. And that was purchased, they think right around it's hard to know. And pardon me for any actual historical inaccuracies because this is just my story and the one that I know. But in the book, essentially, he purchased the land in 1901. And in 1924, he sold those 13 acres to his cousin, Chris Matley, for about $35. Chris Matley had more property on sort of the south west shore of the lake, where you'll see that big hay picture. Sort of if you've seen that one before, that was his property. And so they were kind of back and forth, which had the better hay growing land because there was a little more water over here, but that was also Rush Creek. So they kind of went back and forth. And then about a year later, Chris sold that property to a man named Jose Figueroa, which I can't find any other record of in history except right here, for about $600. And then he sold it to the McPhersons just after that for about $1,000. So the funny thing about the McPhersons is essentially they're the reason we have everything we have over here on the west and north shore. So they originally owned the property on the North Shore. Of course, they originally owned and started the shrimp plant and the Mono Inn. So going forward a little bit, he ended up immigrating to, I think, San Francisco after he got out of the Spanish-American War in the Philippines. And he was fighting, this is another bigger picture. So this is him on the left. We're not sure who it is on the right, but I always say this looks like my dad with his hands. And so he immigrated from Germany, took the name Charles Clarence Miller on his honorable discharge papers, and from the Merchant Marines, or no, sorry, he was in the Army Corps of Engineers, and was a master stonemason, certified master stonemason in Germany, which came in handy later when he built a lot of the stone walls and things here at the Mono Inn for Veneta. So he's the reason really why we're here, and that's kind of what I wanted to forward to that picture. So that's Charles Clarence Miller, or as people know, Pop Miller. If you heard of Pop's Place, that's the original house that he built down on the property. And he was kind of I wish my dad was here, but my dad's grandfather, by all rights, was kind of a feat. He knew how to do everything pretty well. and that's kind of my dad at the same time. So everything, building the house there, pumping down to the salt works. I'm going to go back. This is my, this would have been his two sons, Clarence and Bud, working on one of the old oil, can't remember what they called it, but just a set of wheels essentially that they ran the pipe in and out on to pull the water up to Bob's place to dehydrate the water and harvest the salts. So yeah, I know. It's just, it's an odd order. So to tell a story. So essentially then McPherson sold him the land, and they were harvesting salt, not here on the mainland, but on Paoha when they lived there. And so this is their logo for their, I guess it was Salmono. That was their brand. And so they were harvesting the salts on Paoha. But and then the bag on the left is actually my great-grandfather's handwriting, and that was his bag. And then there's something here that I've actually never seen. It says shrimp net buoy, maybe? So maybe we'll have to go back to those kind of buoys, but I like it. I've never seen it. So they were harvesting salts, a little bit before he was. And so when he bought their land and agreed that he was going to go into that business, he started that in about 1924. And so they made an agreement between them that he would just do the salts, and Vanita would sell them in her store. So that's kind of how that happened, I guess, and they decided that. And he began his salt works officially in 1927. And essentially because, the winters were so severe, he just did it in the summer. So he spent his winters in Southern California and his summers up at Mono Lake with all his kids helping him eventually, a lot of grandkids too. And so his brand went through several different sort of legal struggles. I guess back then, even the FDA was still trying to the government was still trying to regulate, natural supplements and things. And so they would say, oh, this isn't the exact formula. So he'd have to start a new corporation, start a new everything, and then just rebrand his product. So there's been Minicon, Toxinox, Chemisal, Hydrocon, and Drokel. Hydrocon's kind of the family word for all of the salt that they kind of lovingly referred to as the squirty squirts. So I guess pretty much when you're sick, you could expect an enema from Mono Lake. I never had to receive those, so I'm very grateful. But so growing up, for me it was, oh, you have a sore throat, you have a scratch on your leg, oh, you got stung by nettles. Here, let's go get some Mono Lake water and put it on it. So it was, just sort of a part of my childhood to grow up with this lake in front of me constantly. And the mud actually works really good for nettles, if anyone doesn't know that already. So he went through that for the better part of probably, I think the last year he harvested this is just another mineral analysis that he had done. I think, okay, so it was 1951, so about 30 years. And you can read on the top that when he died, he left all this salt at Pop's place. And so if you guys have not visited Pop's place, I know there's some at the museum, but there's about, I don't know, there's a giant mound in the salt room still left from when he was harvesting salt, and it's all in process, but there's a lot of still actual process salt. So if anyone would like some, we're definitely able to give you some. And he sold it, like I said, up in Mrs. Mack's store, which we're calling the Mercantile when we reopen it, hopefully in the spring. I don't know if we'll be able to sell salts, but we're going to try. So Pop Miller came over, started this amazing, adventure of Mono Lake that now has become sort of a legacy, for lack of better words, for our family. And so bringing in the Mono Lake connection, or the Mono Inn connection, my great-grandfather on the left, Vanita, and then Wally on the right, in front of the original Mono Inn. They were good friends, and my great-grandfather was really close with Jack Preston. I guess they were very good friends. And so they spent a lot of time together. And then my mother, this is me. So for some strange reason, my dad, after he got out of Vietnam, decided to come back to the lake and build a house. And I think that was probably because he met my mom and she was tired of living in a trailer. So I was born in our house on the North Shore after 24 hours of pretty brutal labor, according to my mom. And I've always kind of said that I have Mono Lake water in my veins, but literally I was born on the shore of Mono Lake, and my great grandfather and most of my family thought that was pretty cool. My grandma was, for those of you actually who didn't know my grandma, her life was Mono Lake, and she, from her honeymoon to, bringing her kids up here every summer to being really involved in her church, this was her place. And I think I sent a picture to Dave of her on her honeymoon picture, but it's a beautiful picture that I don't think is in here. In 1941. No, it's okay. It's in the book, and you guys are very welcome to look at the book. But she was largely responsible for transferring all of this passion and love for Mono Lake onto me, my parents as well. But my grandma was really active in my childhood. And so, from parties on the beach with mud pies and, slathering yourself in Mono Lake mud. And it just was a wonderful childhood. And so I couldn't have imagined growing up anywhere else. I'm the fifth generation born here at Mono Lake, my parents. And something that really comes across in the book to me is the people that made the industry here, which you look at Vanita, you look at Wally, you look at the Cassidys, you look at all these families that have made a life here, and it wasn't easy, and it's still not really that easy. But so I'm really lucky that my dad chose to do that. And then Wally, for those of you who know Wally, behind the screen, that's a great picture of him on the shrimp boat that he named after his mom, the Vanita. And he started the shrimp plant in the 50s. And so when my dad was about, he must have been about 16, he worked at the plant, and he decided, one day I'm going to buy this place if it ever comes up for sale. And then he left the area, and then he came back, and then it went up for sale. And so he bought it. And that began another kind of my childhood of another, place on Mono Lake that was just sort of part of our family. And it's been about, almost 40 years, 35 years that we've owned the shrimp plant. And I've been running it for about the last 15, and I can't think of another better job except now we own the Mono Inn. So fast going back a little bit, just talking about the Mono Inn again a little bit. Barry has given you guys the regaling talks of Mono Inn, and he's much better at knowing all the history than I am. But just to touch on my personal history here, I grew up in this building with the owners at the time, the Williams, in the 80s, with their granddaughter, Lauren. And some of my first baby pictures are in front of this fireplace, and with their granddaughter just playing. So, we'd run around in here and set the tables, and it looked a little different back then. It was a little dirtier. And the living room was upstairs, so we'd be tromping around during dinner service, and they were tolerant of that. So this was really just like kind of a playground for me growing up, another place on Mono Lake that I could, enjoy being. And when Sarah took over and she ran it in the 90s, I worked for her in the gallery, selling, crazy expensive Ansel Adams prints during dinner service when I was 15 years old. So again, another, just like I talked about this a little during the ghost tour, another strong woman here, just being a good role model for me in industry, knowing that we could do this. So that was really fun to work here as that experience too, because, I'd had a much different experience as a child growing up in the building. And so Sarah was a lot more probably like Vanita. She wanted to keep it pretty tight ship. So every night when it's hard, I walk by the picture in the back and I think, what would Vanita do right now? How would she handle this? And so, for me, it's a really cool thing to be involved in. And when the girls weren't able to buy it, Tom and I decided that we were going to do this and be crazy and buy a restaurant during COVID. But it was really a leap of faith also. I can't imagine really anyone else having this property. It's just so special to us and our family and our connection. So more about Mono Inn. You guys have maybe all seen this on the picture, but this is the menu from, I think, 1955. Oh yeah, it says 1955. So you can see it was always fancy. Lobster tail for $5.50. And we have officially a wood stove, but it's not really a stove. Chef was really excited to get our Binchotan charcoal grill. So we do have wood fired grilling again, which he's really happy about. So this is, I don't know, this wasn't really a huge important one, but just another really cool picture of my grandfather, my grandmother, and my dad and uncle sitting in front of the, that classic Pop's Place wall that everybody took pictures at. I guess that's the end of the slideshow, but just to talk a little bit more about my family and the connection, I think what's important for me is, and I read in this book that it was also important for my great-grandfather, is to maintain and keep these properties in the family, so to speak. I feel like Vanita, hopefully, is proud of us for what we're doing here. And we've tried to stick in the vein of improving the area for not just visitors, but locals alike. And we want everyone to come in and feel taken care of and special. And we want everyone to feel like this is part of their community and this building is theirs. We're just the custodians. And that's how Jeannie said she felt too. And that's very much how I think we feel. So I can answer a lot of questions, but that's essentially sort of the framework of how we got here, what we're doing, why we're doing it. I could go on for hours about how much I love this place and how much I love this lake and what it means to me. But, if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer. But otherwise, I'm just grateful that you let me talk. So from what I know, essentially he would travel around to chiropractic offices. There's a really cool story in here about a man that he met. I can't recall the name, but he wanted to offer him $100,000 advance to build. My great-grandfather had this vision of putting this like German style Baden-Baden on the North Shore of Mono Lake, this spa essentially, right? Oh, I apologize. Okay. Dave asked, who was the primary customers for the salts that my great-grandfather and others harvested on the lake? And I was saying, from what I can tell, it was more of a natural tincture. It wasn't anything medically recognized, but his vision was to build a health spa. And he built a lot of cabins and different things, but I think ultimately he knew that if he expanded like that he'd have to share this with everyone. And he didn't want to do that. He wanted it to be in his family and for guests and visitors, but he didn't want to exploit the lake. He never had any desire to do that. So he turned that man down flat. It says in here, he picked up his hat and walked out. So any other questions? Robin? Okay, so other than enemas, what were the salts used for? Just makes me repeat that. So it's essentially, if you look at the chemical compound or the chemical breakdown of what it is, it's essentially calcium and magnesium chloride. So it's like baking soda with a lot more benefits. So people would drink it for ulcers and gout and soak their feet in it for edema. It works probably similar to how Alka-Seltzer would work, I would imagine. But again, any kind of issue you had as a kid, it was always, oh, go get the Hydrocon. But yeah, no enemas for me, so thanks. Yeah, so I'll look at the book because that's kind of more of a story I should probably read you. It said, this book is long. Okay. So it says, Mr. Miller was not the first person to produce the mineral salts from Mono Lake. As a matter of fact, the local Paiute nation used the salt as a commercial product, trading it with other Indian nations. Among other uses, the salt was valued for washing clothes and for medicinal purposes. Chris Matley, one of the early settlers, operated a salt works across the lake at Lee Vining Creek. History records that he was still operating, history records, pardon me, that he was still operating in 1918. Relative area Hess Flavor produced the salt in the early 1940s down by Rush Creek. Their product name was Salmono. I recall that when I started coming up to Mono Lake, we could see large billboards along the highway showing a hot foot with the caption, "Tired feet? Use Salmono." This was in 1943. The product was being sold as at a gift shop in Lee Vining. So that's recorded by my aunt. So that was her recollection of that.
If anybody can find an old billboard laying somewhere along Highway 395.
Salmono, that'd be great. It's probably a little big, but any other questions? So his production was really crude. It says efficient, but an 1.5-inch pipeline ran down to the lake about 400 or 500 feet from our present house, terminating in about 10 feet of water and anchored by 2 old harvester wheels, which are now high and dry. I forget where these are. I've seen them 100 times in my childhood. They're grown over by willows now. The water was pumped out the lake by an old 1-cylinder flywheel motor, which is still in its original place in the pump house below the present main cabin. We started it up about 10 years ago. This would have been in the 80s, and it ran well. The shoreline was about 200 feet from the house. It's a little more than that now. The production consisted in pumping the lake water into 2 large concrete storage vats for the purpose of evaporation by the sun. These vats were located about 100 feet north of the present main cabin. One was 30 feet square and the other 20 feet square. Both were about 2 feet deep. The water was stored there to be partially evaporated before it flowed by gravity into the boiling vats inside the building we call the salt room. The building was 40 feet long and 15 feet wide, constructed in a manner similar to homes in Bodie in the late 1800s. The boiling vats were metal and mounted on concrete foundations, with 2 tall smokestacks going up through the roof. Oil burners under the vats heated the partially evaporated lake water in the vats. And then it just talks about previous owners who built the Matley house, the McPhersons who moved over from Paoha, the production of the salts. It says the lake water was boiled 24 hours a day. 160 gallons of water yielded 1 pound of salt. There's a great picture in here. I'll pull it out and leave it open. It's my great aunt Vera, Benita McPherson, Barry McPherson, and a couple of my dad's first cousins, so Vera's little sons, all playing in one of the salt pools. That was like their swimming pools, and they played in them a lot. And so there's all these great pictures of all these naked kids in here playing in the salt pools.
Hillary?
You're in. I don't know.
This is Rich Foy speaking for the Zoom audience. This has been very interesting. Thank you. We're wondering here, are you intending to keep the restaurant open again?
We can't hear you, Rich. Can you repeat that?
Are you intending to keep the restaurant open during winter?
We're keeping the restaurant open during winter. Yes, we are. So we are taking a small shoulder season. We were open all last winter. We're keeping a shoulder season just because we all need a break. Running 2 businesses is not as easy as I imagined maybe it might be. We'll close on the 17th of October and we'll reopen for Thanksgiving dinner, Rich. But we will be open Friday through Monday through all winter long. Rich, do we have anything in the chat?
That was just it. There's been 21 enjoying this.
You're cutting out. We can't hear you.
Oh, this is interesting. I'm talking right at the microphone too.
Much better.
I have no explanation for that. So anyway, yeah, there's no other questions from the chat. Can you hear this?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, probably because I'm shouting. So anyway, there were 21 of us and enjoying your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else, any questions before? Oh,
Hillary, since this pictures of Clarence and Bud, could you talk a little bit about that generation with
Sure.
Vera and Berna?
Of course.
Pipe got straight, like
Yeah.
how many kids are?
so my great grandfather, Oh, sorry. Gosh, I'm not used to this, you guys. Okay, so Janet asked, could I clarify the breakdown of the family tree from Pop Miller? So this is Pop Miller and Anna Gelkin Miller. So my great grandfather and my great grandmother, both from Germany, and they had 8 children. If you want me to recite them all, I will. Clarence, Bud, Vera, Verna, the twins, my grandma and her twin sister, Alice, Gladys, did I say Bud? That's Frank. Vera, Verna, Alice, Gladys, Bud, Clarence, what's her name? Elsa, and 8 kids they had. And most of the boys would come up and work the salt works with my great grandfather in the summers. The girls came up to cook the boys' meals. So my grandma and her twin sister were cooks very early in their lives. It says right here that even though the soul of Mono Lake was in my father, my mother Anna did her part to keep his dream from dissolving. And that was written by Vera. And then the cool thing is, I'll leave this out and you guys can look at it. I grew up with essentially my great aunt Vera, my grandma Verna, really close all their lives. Vera's family and Estel, which you guys might have known them, they ended up with the property on the west end, which is the original Pop's Place property. They had 3 sons. And so all of their kids, I grew up with all their kids. We had cousin camp. They were all pretty Lutheran. So we had, summer camp, but it had to be Lutheran summer camp. So my childhood was, spent with them, spent up here, spent just really enjoying the lake, but it was always family. We just had a ton of family always all around, all their kids. And then, Tom Clark, he ended up on the property as well, Gladys's son. So, and then Jeff and Kathy live in my grandparents' original house that they helped build in the 60s. And so it's the 6-7 of us on the property. It's my mom and dad in their house that they built that I was born in, my aunt and uncle, Jeff and Kathy, Tom, Brian, if you count him, the caretaker at Pop's Place. He's not really there that often, but he's there. And then Tom and I in my grandparents' house that they built after Jeff and Kathy kicked him out. Well, they got married, so they had to kick. They were just, it was just, they were like seasonal at that point. They were just coming up in the summers. So yeah, so that's kind of how the family lays it out. I don't know if that makes sense for everyone. So they lived in Southern California. So when I was a kid, they had moved to Alhambra, but my grandma grew up and met my grandfather in Orange. So that's where they were. And then if you look on that mineral breakdown, you'll see that Baldwin Park. So they lived in Orange, but then they eventually moved to Baldwin Park. And then when my grandparents met and were married, they moved to their own house I think in Orange to start. And then they moved to San Marino, and then they moved to Alhambra. So Southern California, they're all buried in Southern California, except my great grandfather, who was the other side, the Hansen side. He's buried in Germany. So. No, it's part of it for sure. So Duncan asked if I could explain the production of the shrimp plant and how that works. So from what I know, Wally McPherson started the shrimp plant in a gas station across from the Mono Inn, or a shack or something that he built. So it was right over here across the street. And he was putting brine shrimp in buckets and then putting them in little bags. That's what I know. So then, I guess after that, the shrimp plant was built, and he got this big, beautiful boat, which is in here, and you guys might have seen pictures, but there's the propeller there. It's from the Veneta. I don't know if the Paoha was ever a shrimp boat. I don't think it was. So just the Veneta. And if you see the picture behind the screen that we had blown up, and it's also here, that's Wally with his pipe on the Veneta with this big, he sort of had like a big crane that he'd haul the nets up in. And there's a really cool picture of it actually on the panels of the shrimp net coming up. It was a circular round funnel, similar to what we do now. We just don't haul them up. So he started the shrimp plant and then sold it sometime in the 60s to, I guess, from what I gather, a retired Nazi named Red. No, okay, mom says no. Hans, sorry, Hans. And then Hans sold it to Red. And my dad worked for Red. Yeah, see, that's why it's good to have the old people in the crowd. So my dad worked for Red in the 60s at the plant, presumably harvesting brine shrimp. I don't know, because he's funny. He doesn't tell me all the stories. So he there, and it just was a thing. Like, probably, like I always said, I was going to buy the Mono-Inn when I was a kid, although I forgot I said that. But Pearl reminded me on the bus that I would always say one day I was going to buy the Tioga Lodge and the Mono-Inn. So I'm halfway there. But then I guess there's a man running it before my parents bought it named Tony Wheeler. And he was harvesting mostly for tropical fish food, making quite a good amount of money, big harvest from what we can tell from the records. And when my parents bought it, it was sort of, it was shut down. It had been, all the money had been embezzled by the employees. So, and then they took a bunch of dehydrated shrimp and built these giant piles of it and left it. So my parents bought it. It was just rat city and overgrown and disgusting. And I think kind of like we did here, they just blind faith went into escrow and started cleaning it up and hoping that it closed. So then they bought it and sort of turned it into the same tropical fish food production. Connections through the years, they would harvest and sell to people in San Diego that would mix it with other things like squid and different things. But then probably mid-90s, we started focusing more on aquaculture feed. And so that's been the main production for the entire time that I've been running. I mean, we do some tropical fish food production still, but it's not the majority of what we do. We harvest it in bulk, we package it in bulk, and we're harvesting right around probably about 350,000 pounds a season, but these are kind of our slower seasons that we've had in the last few years. It's not freeze dried. It hasn't been freeze dried as long as we've had it. It's always been frozen. So, any other specific questions about the shrimp plant? Yeah, we just have to have you sign waivers. But yes, definitely, it's a fun. It's also a very crude operation. I mean, it's literally. We've mechanized it a little bit, but only in like the improvement of the equipment. It's still the original conveyor belt. We do have a dewatering screen, which is really high tech. It's a vibratory screen that shakes the water out. We have a new filling machine, but that's the literal same filling machine that was there before for 25 years, just a new one. We have a new sealer, same as the old one, and we still use local people to harvest it, package it, and produce it. So it's a pretty cool process. I mean, that was really what drew me back to the area, was to come and like show my parents I could run the shrimp plant for them. And so hopefully I've proven that by now. So
When you say aquaculture,
yeah.
Is it people?
So when they say aquaculture, what I mean is about 80% of the world's shrimp is farm raised for human consumption. And so the shrimp that we eat, a lot of it comes from Ecuador, Central America, Mexico, a lot from Thailand. And so it's not done responsibly everywhere. Some places they cut down mangrove swamps to harvest shrimp. Some places they have these beautiful, gorgeous, elite, biosecure raceways. And that's more who buys our product. The people that are going to send it to the highest tier, Japan, Australia, and Europe. We're not selling so people can buy it from Walmart. It doesn't work that way for our product because it is really expensive and it is the most pristine brine shrimp product you can buy in the world. So. Yes, so you can already do that actually. We're working with a farm right now in Downey that is just raising these beautiful giant they're calling them colossal prawns. So if you had the shrimp and grits with polenta, which I know you did, you had those prawns, which they haven't been fed our product yet, but we're working on it. They're just improving their farm right now enough to where they can do some testing. And so once they have that, we're going to do testing because I don't like the finished product taste. It tastes like feed to me because I know the difference. If they buy our product, their shrimp's going to taste a whole lot better. So I'm really excited to a lake to table shrimp dish. So yeah. Yes, us too. That was really exciting when we bought the place. We're like, oh, we can sell brine shrimp. But I mean, it's hard because it's like, then you got to go through a whole another process that's for human consumption. Can you eat it? It's a very common question from tourists. It's a very common question. This is probably the number 2 question I get in here in the restaurant. What's the bulldozer doing down there? It's a backhoe and it just lifts the tanks in and out of the boat. We don't want to build a permanent structure. Wally had a permanent structure of like these big cranes that he kind of like on the boat where they drove in and they lifted the tanks off. Randy can probably tell you more about this than I could. But we don't want to have a permanent structure. So we just pull the backhoe down there and we move it when we're done. And so, yes, you can eat them. They taste like almost like nothing when they're clean. Tastes like a lot like salt when they're not clean. But there's this cool magazine that I get every month. It's like Aquaculture Feed Magazine. And they're really trying hard to find new protein sources that aren't, cows and sheep and things that take a lot of water to raise. So they've been using brine shrimp in Thailand and Vietnam and putting it in dishes that kind of end up coming out like egg foo young, but it's the protein. And so it's really cool to think like that. This is part of the global food chain that's helping, decrease the overfishing of the oceans, the, over agriculturing, the non-sustainable food culture that we live in. So it's kind of a cool piece to be involved in that. Now we get to serve food. So it's like good to do it all now. Do we give tours now of the shrimp plant? So we've really tried not to give tours, mostly because it's me that has to give them or Tom, and we're very busy. If we had like a dedicated tour guide, it'd be different. It's also a liability for us. So we kind of just say, no, we don't give tours, but of course we can set something up for you guys. I mean, it's very basic, but we just have you sign a waiver. That's really it. So. Yeah, I think it's really cool. Most people don't know about it. It's like, what? There's a what? It's a very strange thing for people to, this guy on table 1 with Bunny the other night, he's like, shrimp? There's shrimp in the lake. Like, what? Yep. So this is Wallace. I had a hard time putting them in the same room because I don't think they would liked each other that much at that point. But he built this place. I mean, I'm sure she helped him as much as he did. But, Vanita ran the place, even like all the promotional posters, it's her name, Vanita Retch McPherson. It was her deal. But I figure we owed it to Wally to put him on Wallace, to put him on the wall. But yeah, I want to put Vanita up there, but she's too big. So she's watching over her dining room. And did you guys all see the piano? That's another thing I wanted to tell everyone, that if everyone hasn't seen it, magically and miraculously, just like everything else that's happened with getting this place, we ended up getting Vanita's piano back. And we know for sure it's her piano now because we had it tuned and worked on. And when we pulled the player out and all the mechanisms inside, there was a box of old keys. And stapled to that box was Bob Beach's card when he was a chimney sweep. And he's the one that ended up with it. We know he's the one that rescued it out from the snow. So we know that's Vanita's piano. So we were able to get it back, which is so cool. Thanks to the Goodwin family. It's upstairs in the lake room, fully playable. It's gorgeous. So, yeah.
We had some people come in the museum that wanted to know about Native American foods. And
and they asked if the Paiutes, Mono Lake Paiutes, harvested the shrimp.
So Linda asked, the people in the museum wanted to know about the Native American foods and if the Native Americans harvested shrimp. So nowhere in any literature that I've found or any stories that I've heard, they harvested the shrimp. I know they harvested the brine fly larva, but the kutsave, but nothing else that I know.
Well, I was told by original.
No, I'm sure they did. I mean, why wouldn't they? Yeah. But I don't have any no pictures, no records, no stories. You know, I talked to Alan Blaver about that once, and he had no memory. But I'm gonna talk to Lily soon. Actually, I'm gonna sit down with her and do like an interview with her because I just want to talk to her because she was really good friends with Benita. Just want to ask her questions, you know, and just record it. But I'll ask her and see if she has any. She's probably the last treasure of knowledge we have from that era.
Yes.
I'm gonna do it sooner.
One of the funniest or interesting things that Lily Matthew ever, rather than make you repeat it, one of the interesting things that we're talking about Lily Matthew, ever told me about Vanita was after we did we had an event here and we had a portrayal of Vanita McPherson, and Lily said, she didn't look like that and she would never have worn that dress.
So there's a lot of real stories in here about Vanita, mostly about her shushing Jack when he would curse. But some really cool recollections of my dad's first cousin. So, you know, the 75-year-olds among us and around about that time. Just some really cool. Let me go to the slide. This one, I like going to the Mono Inn at night, just some funny stories, and then some other funny stories about, it must have been sooner in the presentation. No, there was that one you said was kind of busy earlier. I don't know. That's why I'm looking. No. Oh. Now I'm just making my own. So this is a cool comment that my dad's first cousin, I don't know how to do that, Dave, sorry. So Mrs. Mack was a complex woman, someone who, if I knew her today, could be the subject of a novel or an interesting chapter of local history. I'm sure she was pretty much larger than life because she ran this place, but you can read it. Yeah, larger than life. That's what it says. So she was a person who epitomized elegance, like a former film star or a diamond in a different setting. So how I imagine her is, you know, she's this very finishing school, elegant, like really stylish woman. If you look at some of her clothes that she's wearing on the island, if you've ever been to the island, you know you do not want to be wearing heels and a beautiful pressed white dress. So this beautiful, you know, belle, and then she meets this guy who wants to live in the Wild West and up in the mountains. And she still has all that grace. But, you know, she lived on the highway. She probably had a shotgun somewhere, and she was probably pretty tough. So I imagine her this beautiful, elegant, graceful, you know, pit bull. But I didn't know her, so maybe someone here could tell us more about her. That's Jack at the bar, which is here too. That's not how I remember Jack, but it's a little before my time. Jack was grumpy, I know that for sure. And he was, you know, he was just there's another cool picture of him that we blew up of him on the island raising those special goats that they raised, and then little Wally in the picture with him. I think Jack was just, I mean, nobody seems to know, but I'm pretty sure that Jack and Benita were a thing. As soon as Wallace left. That's what everybody talks about in this book too. Would I repeat this? I'm pretty sure that Jack and Benita were a couple. Were you there? Do you remember? He concurs. And the lady down the street with the upside down house. And Jack too. And we're getting really scandalous here. Speculation. Well, yeah, so I mean, I don't know, but that's just what I imagine. I'm sure she was an amazing woman. She ran this place for the better part of 50 years in its heyday. And all I ever want to do is try to make her proud every day. She's playing the piano. That's the piano in that corner. And it's funny because Barry was all excited, like, here, look at this picture we found, and look at this, and the piano, Jerry has it down at the Inyamono Title Company. And we went down and looked at it, and we were like, well, the wood is different, the feet are different, the little stanchion is different. I'm like, I don't know, Barry. He's like, it's definitely that one. And I was like, okay. And then about a month later, one of my employees at the shrimp plant said, hey, there's a piano at Victory Lodge that has this plaque on it that says from the Mono Inn, the Inyo Mono Inn. I was like, what? So I took a picture of it, and it was covered in mattresses. Just poor piano, just been mistreated its whole life since it left here. And I was like, wow. So I got in touch with the caretaker, got in touch with the owners, and the owners were willing to give it to us. I mean, just give it to us. It's that big mansion on Gold Lake. And Gary Cino, the 99-cent store owner, built that. According to, again, speculation, but how I figure, him and Bob Beach were really good friends. So Bob Beach must have given it to him or bought it or sold it to him. But he spent, from what I also heard, he spent about $7,000 having it pretty fully restored. And it's in really nice shape. So, yeah. Frank.
And I think I know where to hold it. I'll try. Anyway, personal remembrances of Vanita. Okay. My parents and I would come in here. I was a little kid. Vanita would proudly usher us into the upstairs over by the piano. And then she would show us the various animals that had been killed, stuff, whatever. And they were around. She was very proud of that. She was just a fashionable lady. And I really remember her dearly. I really do.
So Frank, the piano, was it upstairs in that corner?
Yes, it was.
That must be that picture. Because we all were told that it was down here in the dining room. But maybe it moved.
No, it was upstairs. Sure was.
Was it up there used as their personal space, or was it open to the public?
Actually, it was her personal space, but she would tour you through there if she, wanted to do that. And so it was great to be ushered around by this fashionable lady. But yeah, she wore these shoes that were, anyway, just a fashionable person, very tough, had to be for what she did and how she did it. And boy, it was great to know her.
When did they stop pumping gas here?
Oh, so yeah, I have zero idea. Randy? When did they stop pumping gas here? I mean, this was a Shell station.
Well, when did they stop?
There was a man in Levining for many years, and he can remember the car. It was a Studebaker, Silverhawk, Robert Newton. And he, I believe, was the last one to run the gas station across the street. But there's a gas station here too. And the cool thing, there's a really cool picture of all the Shell station owners. You can see the fireplace in the background if you guys look at this picture when you get up. but it's all these beautiful women. And then the Virginia, Barry's mom, Vanita's daughter-in-law, is sitting at the table, and she's just a knockout, beautiful. And of course, Wally was definitely handsome. And so the gas pump that was upstairs somehow ended up with my dad's cousin, Mark Logan, in Arizona, who wants to give it back to us. So I got to go to Arizona. And then my dad's first cousin, Tom Clark, has the original glass shell globe that was lit up. So we're going to put that probably in the mercantile when we open and figure out how to light it up. That was the original glass, big shell. So it was a shell station. So
Now, what's the Mark? Who sent? Where
Mark Logan's related to us through my grandfather, Walter Hansen, who married my grandma Verna, who is Charles Clarence Miller's daughter. My grandfather, Walter, ended up buying a lot of the siblings' property down here. That's how he ended up with so much of the land, because they really wanted to keep in the family. And so, yeah, I'm getting there. So my grandfather's cousin, Vivian, who is Stephanie's Logan, if you remember Stephanie Logan's mom, their mothers were sisters who immigrated from France together to Oklahoma. And so my grandfather's first cousin's daughter, brother is Mark Logan.
So through Walter Hansen's side of the family.
Yeah.
So this is Mono Basin
Yeah.
genealogy.
Yeah. Yeah. And luckily, my grandpa loved Mono Lake as much as my grandma did. And that's hard to find, I think, in a husband. Probably he loved that he could come up here and hunt and fish and cavort around and do whatever he wanted. Drink a lot at the Mono Inn, from what I know about it. And so, yeah, just a lot of just crazy, deep roots here. So fun experiences and history. And so, anyone else? All right. Thanks for letting me just be off the cuff, because that's the best way I tell stories. So
Thank you so much. It was so heartwarming to hear you talk about how you are entrenched in the lake. That's pretty amazing. So thank you very much. Okay, Rich, have we got anything that we need to take care of from chats, or are we good?
Oh, we are good.
All righty. Well, just a reminder that next month we'll be back to the first Monday of the month, and we will have it's November 7th, and my goodness, that is election day, and Jeff Gabriel is Tuesday. Okay, the day before election day, and Jeff Gabriel is still going to come and talk with us. That's wonderful. Okay, and the book that he will be talking about is Born Free and Equal by Ansel Adams, the story of loyal Japanese Americans. And I looked it up. It looks really cool. So I think it'll be something that everyone will enjoy, and we will be back at the community center, and hope to see you there or in Zoom land. So have a good evening, everyone, and thank you again. And I just also wanted to mention that the snacks, the hors d'oeuvres that were out for all of us that are here tonight were provided by Hillary and Tom, and thank you so much. You've been so gracious and wonderful to the Historical Society. Okay, thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.